I think the most important thing is you shouldn't wait for anybody's permission to do anything. I think that's like the one of the most important things. If you have an idea, just start as early as you can. Find the least path of resistance, and just go for it, and just do your best work. And it might not work out immediately, but you learn. You learn, and if you keep learning, if you keep iterating, eventually you get better.
So how are you? How have you been?
I am doing great. It's been a very eventful couple of weeks. I think everybody kind of feels that way around the world, but yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of things have happened, kind of like back to back on my end. So I'm managing the best I can. I think that's the best way to put it.
So you still work from home or you go
Yeah,
to the office?
right now, all my work is from home. So that's the bulk of what I'm doing. I'm lucky to have like 2 contract jobs running
Okay.
simultaneously right now with a few companies doing some very interesting work. So I can't really complain. I would like things to go back to normal. Don't ask me for when I think that's going to happen, but
I mean, no one
yes.
really knows, right? So
So
even if I
yeah.
did ask you, you probably won't have an answer.
Yeah, honestly, anybody who answers questions like that is probably setting themselves up for disappointment at some point. But yeah, so yeah, all my work right now is from home and just trying to make the best, build up my profile continually, and yeah. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Hopefully, good things. At least
Okay. Okay.
that's what I'm working towards.
So in the long run, do you want to continue with the whole media podcasting thing, or do you?
Well, the podcast is the big reason why I have those 2 contract jobs right now.
Okay.
I think it's been a great way to like showcase my own like individual skills. When I graduated, I didn't really have like a lot of prospects. There weren't really like a lot of like employment opportunities. So I really had to like take things into my own hands. And starting the podcast was an excellent way to show myself as proactive and knowledgeable about the sector that I wanted to work in. So that got me noticed, and it's gotten me like a lot of good opportunities. So right now I'm working with this Energy Institute in Washington D.C.
Okay.
Doing work around nuclear energy. I also guest host for their podcast because they have this like really really big podcast around nuclear energy. And I'm also working with this company in Abu Dhabi. They do events, and I'm organizing this. I don't know if you've seen it, but this like energy dialogue series focused on the African oil and gas industry, interviewing like a bunch of key executives in the sector. And so yeah, that's really the 2 things that I'm doing right now, and I'm still pushing the bucket for my own podcast. Trying to find a sponsor has been an extreme sport. I think.
I'm not even
Yeah.
began to think about that for myself at the moment.
Oh,
I'm
you
like,
get there.
let me build this first before.
You'll get there at some point because obviously you have to think about how does this become sustainable, because
Yeah.
right now I'm doing all the editing, and the reason why I'm doing all the editing is because I'm working from home and I don't have like a regular hour job that requires me
Yeah.
to like go out all the time. But once I do get that, it's going to be a matter of I can't have that same time commitment to put into editing and all the other non-core stuffs, like actually interviewing and getting guests, like do those really important stuff. But all the other things like editing, posting, like they just take a lot of time, and I don't really have to do it myself. But obviously I can't pay someone to do it right now
Yeah.
because the podcast is generating revenue. So like that's really what I'm thinking right now. Trying to find like a sponsor, trying to find programs that can give us like some sort of funding. So yeah, it's a good place to be in. That means that the podcast has grown to that space where it's getting that kind of attention, and it's healthy enough to be able to do something like that. So yeah, so just building on and building on, and we'll see where the next few months take us, I guess.
I
That's pretty
mean, at least you sort of identified what you want to do, and it's in line with what you studied and all that. And for me personally, it's been, I tell people I don't really have a lot to tell people. So what I can do is to get people who can inform folks about various things and then ask them questions. Because I mean, part of why I want to speak to you is this whole energy climate change thing is something I've been quite interested in, and being someone who spends or wastes my time in the whole political realm, I mean, I see the whole divide in a sense, and I know very little about it. I mean, there are many things that I even know about it. So I would really want to speak with someone, who does, one of two things. Ask the question, probably that will start me growing and developing myself in that area. Because I see that climate change and all whatnot is a big topic, especially when you see a teenager standing in the UN and asking them,
Yeah.
how can you? So,
Yeah, I agree, and I still haven't figured everything out. Like, I don't know exactly what I want to do next. I'm kind of taking each opportunity as it comes, and I started out the podcast really in the same way because it was very intentional move on my part. Like I said, it wasn't like there were a lot of opportunities just like waiting for me after I graduated. So I really had to be intentional. Like, if it came to a point where if I wanted to stay in the energy industry, I had to like prove that I can create something valuable and I'm employable and I have skills that are relevant. So it was a lot of uncertainty. It's still a lot of uncertainty, but I think now I'm a bit more used to it and just used to the idea of. I think the most important thing is you shouldn't wait for anybody's permission to do anything. I think that's like the one of the most important thing. If you have an idea, just start as early as you can, find the least path of resistance and just go for it and just do your best work. And it might not work out immediately, but you learn, and if you keep learning, if you keep iterating, eventually you get better. I think that's been the story of the podcast. It wasn't a hit when it first started. It was a very, very slow process, getting the first 5 guests, getting the first 10 guests, getting the first 20 guests, getting the first 30 guests. Like, it grows, and if you do a good job, people notice it, and people you find people that would want to help you. But I think that's just a very, very powerful thing. So like, don't get discouraged because you don't know exactly what the direction is. Just keep doing the best in the path you're on, and honestly, it'll work out. It might take time, like there's a lot of patience involved, and it's going to be very frustrating at some points, but it'll work out.
yeah,
Even when you're getting guests and you're like
yeah.
maybe making money, you still get to ask yourself like, oh my god, am I wasting my? It's natural. It's completely natural.
Talking about the whole global warming, climate changing, I don't know where I should start with that, but maybe for folks who don't really understand the terminologies and all that, can you just, is there, in a sense, a similarity? Can the words be used interchangeably, or is there a difference?
Well, I guess there is a change. There is a link between them. So I guess I'll start from the beginning and kind of put where my expertise is, and then I can talk about it from there. So climate change is being driven by greenhouse gas emissions, and that can mean a few different things. So you can talk about carbon dioxide or methane. Basically, it means that um, the earth is getting warmer because of human activity. Like, that is the core of the climate change discussion, because of human activity, because of our industrializations over the past few years, because of our reliance on fossil fuels. We've 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 impacted the climate so much that it's changing fundamentally away from how it's supposed to be naturally, and that change is largely driven by human activity. And the point where I come in is that I study energy systems. Like, that is like my thing. And the reason why energy is so related to climate change is because a lot of our energy generation, I think worldwide around 75% or 80%, comes from fossil fuels. And the emissions from using fossil fuels to create energy or electricity or whatever it is, whatever the end product is, at some point in that value chain, emissions get released, and those emissions are adding up to the effect of climate change and global warming. So now the point is that even though a lot of our energy systems still depend on fossil fuels, there are still a lot of people around the world that do not have access to energy, and most of them come from developing nations like most countries in Africa and Southeast Asia and some parts of South America. So let's say you have 2 billion people right now who don't have like 24/7 access to energy like they do in most parts of America and North America and Europe. So what happens when these people now want to get more energy? if they follow the traditional pathways of how energy system has developed in the past, they're going to go through the fossil fuel route. And then you're adding more carbon intensity because you're going to have more emissions if they're burning fossil fuels to generate their energy. So it's kind of like we are caught in this cycle. So now that we're looking critically at it, that if you want to reverse the impacts of climate change, we need to address our energy systems, and we need to look at the fact that we can't always rely on fossil fuels to generate energy and electricity. So now, if we can't do that, what are the options for those people who obviously want to have a better life for themselves? They want to be able to turn on their light. They want to be able to do things. They want to be able to have their businesses get run by electricity and not have to pay like huge amounts and have their own personal generating sets. So this is that where our mostly renewable energy comes in, and alternative energy sources that are a lot cleaner. And that is why a lot of attention has been put into climate change in general. That a lot of factors at play. Obviously, you can also talk about the environment, about like specific industries like farming and raising of animals. So it's a very multifaceted issue. And but the area that I focus on is the impact of the energy systems on this global energy transition and the global effects of climate change. So that's really where I focus in the whole conversation.
All right. So before we come to the energy systems, in a sense, what I hear from people is, on the one hand, some folks believe that climate change is inevitable. It will always happen. But for some others, they say it's primarily because of human, activity, in a sense. And so we have to, in a sense, reduce the things we do, our activities, so as not to, cause this. But some people feel as though no, human activity is not what's really, really driving it. And so that's where we hear about climate change denial and the hoax and all that.
Okay, so
so
yeah,
where do we fall on that?
so let's talk about that for a second. First off, there have been multiple scientific studies. I think the IPCC report that was released very recently is a very good piece to start for anybody who is interested. I think you can find very good summaries of it online. But there are very clear correlations that show that climate change is being directly affected by human activity, and it's mostly tied to the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we release based on the activities that we generate. Like I said previously, you can look at the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, where it all comes down almost all the time to human consumerism and our energy consumption, because they've all been so tightly tied to the fossil fuel industry. And these things always emit, because if you look at our regular lifestyle right now compared to a few years ago, it's so carbon intensive. And the more developed your country is, and the more your lifestyle is comfortable, as you put it. Let's say you have a car, you fly a few times a year, you have electricity in your house like 24 hours a day. Obviously, this isn't the reality in many African countries. But even if you look at a country like Nigeria now, if you are wealthy, you're going to have your own diesel generator on most of the time, and it's going to be on constantly. And even if you don't really like know about climate change, just looking at that, at the diesel generator, you can see the emissions coming out of it, and you know that those emissions are dangerous. Now imagine that over a long period of time, and those emissions keep piling up. The cars, the busy cars on the road, almost entirely our transportation, especially in developing countries, is all entirely combustion engines. These things add up. So it's a very clear correlation to see that human activity plays a very big role. And anybody who at this point tells you otherwise, they are not being sincere. Because the effects of climate change, even though it sounds like such an abstract problem, it's something we can see manifest in everyday life. It manifests in terms of like change in rainfall patterns. It manifests in terms of drought. It manifests in just different ways in our everyday life. So basically, if you're taking a critical look about why is it twice as hot this summer as it was last summer, that's just the effects of climate change. Fundamentally, the way a certain region is supposed to operate in terms of what the weather is like, what the rainfall pattern is like, it's going to change over time. And all these things are things that we can see playing out in different parts of the world. and it's something that it's only going to get worse. I don't know if many of the listeners are going to know